Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NFI webinar. My name is Lisa Wettig. I'm with the National Fisheries Institute, and I'm joined today with my colleague Mark Bowen. And we're going to share with you information about resources that the Better Seafood Board has put together for use by NFI members. We're going to record this webinar and post the webinar on the members-only portal of the NFI's website, aboutseafood.com. So it will be available for later viewing by you or others in your company. So with that, why don't we get started? Again, this presentation today is just a review of some of the resources that the Better Seafood Board has developed for your use as NFI members to help support your commitment to economic integrity. So the topics for today, we're going to just briefly review what the Better Seafood Board is and the pledge that all NFI members sign every year. Go over the newly revamped Better Seafood Board website, review the logo and the usage of the logo, and then some review of a best practices guidance document that was developed 2 years ago, and some presentations that the Better Seafood Board has developed that you can use in your company's training activities for your company staff. And then finally, we'll look at some additional documents that are developed as resources for NFI members. So just briefly about the Better Seafood Board. The Better Seafood Board was formed in 2007, so it's been in existence now for 11 years. It was formed really out of a desire of NFI members to really end seafood fraud in the United States. A lot of our members are family-owned companies. They didn't want to have to pass along a business to their families that was really founded on having to cheat customers. So NFI members started an economic integrity initiative, and from that initiative was the formation of the Better Seafood Board. It was formed really to provide the accountability of NFI members for their commitment to not committing seafood fraud. It's a separate entity from National Fisheries Institute. We wanted to have some type of hands-off approach, but all NFI members are members of the Better Seafood Board. There's a separate board of managers that have 15 members representing the NFI board, NFI membership, and the public. So the Better Seafood Board was originally formed to really provide a system for customers, restaurants, retail operations, food service, to report unresolved challenges with seafood fraud. We still maintain a call center that we encourage your customers to call in if they have a situation with unresolved economic fraud, if they felt they were cheated by their supplier and their supplier wasn't taking steps. The Better Seafood Board also serves as a link between industry and the government. Oftentimes, NFI members, as you can imagine, don't want to be the entity that goes to a government agency about someone committing fraud or asking for stronger enforcement of our current laws and regulations, and the Better Seafood Board will service that function. Now, the current focus of BSB, like I said, we've been around for 11 years. We're really focused now on awareness of the Better Seafood Board itself, and just providing best practices for preventing fraud to make sure that you're not getting cheated or to make sure that you're not cheating your customer inadvertently. And we really want to make sure that customers are supporting NFI members, the suppliers that are playing by the rules. So just briefly want to share with you again what the Economic Integrity Pledge is. Some of you might not have seen that. It is signed by CEOs or upper management in your companies. But every year, your management will sign a commitment to economic integrity. And again, this is pretty much the same pledge that was developed in 2007. It was tweaked slightly a couple years ago, but really no major changes to it. But again, our members all pledge that they will conduct themselves in the business in an honest and trustworthy manner. And they're committed to really 4 different things. And it might be difficult to read on the screen, so we'll just kind of explode them here for you to see. So there's 4 parts of the pledge. One is that the products are correctly labeled for weights and counts. Products are correctly labeled for identity, and that the species are not substituted in any manner. Third is that the products are correctly labeled for the country of origin. And finally, that the products adhere to all other labeling laws. And then the final piece of the pledge is that upper management is committed to work with employees, supply chain, and customers to ensure that they understand our company's commitment to economic integrity. So that's one reason we wanted to have this webinar, is to try to reinforce that aspect of the pledge and to provide you with tools that will help share the message of your company's commitment to economic integrity. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mark Bowen, to review the revamped Better Seafood Board website. Mark,
Hi,
do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, Mark.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you, Lisa. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the revised Better Seafood Board website. So can you advance, please? Here's a screenshot of what the website looks like now. And this is part of the NFI's About Seafood website, aboutseafood.com website, I should say. So we revised this following the format that's used on the aboutseafood.com website. And this is where you land when you do a search for Better Seafood Board. And this website, or this web page, was recently updated with input from a working group, and it provides links to other information. All right, advance, please. Here's the bottom part of that same page. So you can see here that there's links to other types of information, link to some of the information we'll talk about later on. But it gives you picture icons that you can click on, and then that takes you to these other information. Next slide, please. Also on the aboutseafood.com website, there's a consumer protection page. And on that page, it talks about the role of BSB in helping to stamp out economic fraud. All right, the next one here, there's also a news section which has news that the Better Seafood Board is a part of. Whenever there's a story about fraud or mislabeling or something like that, it's added to this page on a rotating basis. And so then that is something you can also access to on About Seafood, or once you're on the Better Seafood Board webpage. So with that, I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Great, thank you, Mark. I want to talk briefly about the Better Seafood Board logo. I mean, this logo is available for NFI members to use, and not a lot of our members know that they have access to this. So the use of the logo shows your company's commitment to fair and lawful business practices. So we encourage NFI members to request to use the logo. We will send artwork to companies for incorporation into sales materials, website booths, or websites, trade show booths. When the Better Seafood Board Board of Managers looked to see how the logo could be used, they felt that this logo really wasn't suitable to be placed on packages. So the terms of use of the logo really talk about using it on trade materials, websites, emails, because they felt that if it starts appearing on packages, it's really not a consumer-facing program. It's more of a a B2B type program, and we felt that having the logo on the website on a package might not be the most appropriate use. But if you were to request the use of the logo, and you can do that by just sending an email to Mark Bowen, and his email address is here on the screen, you will receive artwork with the logo, along with the logo use guidelines. And again, it's fairly easy to use. The only restriction really is that it not be placed on packaging. So any NFI member can request the use of this logo. So we just wanted to share with you some examples of how companies have used it, because we really encourage people to request the logo and to start using it to show your company's commitment to the BSB. One example on the right-hand side of the screen is part of a trade show booth. This is at the Boston Seafood Show, and it shows how the BSB logo was incorporated along with other logos that Harvest Select, one of NFI members, supports. So it does show their commitment to the Better Seafood Board. Another simple way of using it is to put it into an email signature line. Very easy to add to a signature to drop that artwork in there. Again, and this is a logo example of Jamie Marshall, who's actually the chairman of the Better Seafood Board of Managers, and how he uses the BSB logo on an email signature line. We do have a list of the members that have asked to see the logo or use the logo. So again, if you're interested, just email Mark Bowen, and he can get you that artwork so you can incorporate the use of the logo in your sales collateral email documents. Again, it's to show your support to economic integrity. And an easy way is really just to display a small poster at any type of trade show in your office, and we would be happy to send you this artwork as well if someone's interested in using this to promote the Better Seafood Board and your company's commitment to the BSB. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark. He's going to present the next two sections of this webinar. We'll talk about the best practices guidance document.
All right. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about a valuable document that the BSB developed for best practices guidance. Next slide, please. So here's just what the front page of it looks like. But the Better Seafood Board developed best practices guidance for addressing best practices for addressing seafood fraud in 2015 and 2016. And this was, it's available to the public on the BSB website, or BSB web page, I should say. So this was initiated at the request of the Food and Drug Administration. They approached NFI, and they wanted NFI to lead an industry effort to develop best practices guidance for addressing seafood fraud. And this coincided with the agency's focus on fraud prevention. So the NFI Board of Directors then asked the Better Seafood Board to appoint a task force that would work on the guidance. Next slide, please. So at that time, then we put together a task force, and it was composed of industry members who were actively involved in buying, selling, and processing. And this task force represented significant expertise across a number of BSB member companies. And as I mentioned before, they met during 2015 and 2016 to discuss this guidance, and then they developed the guidance the businesses could use in their operation. And since they were all members of all part of BSB member companies, they knew exactly the kind of information that businesses wanted and could use in their operation. And I have to say, this task force was very meticulous in their discussion, and they were very focused on what to include and how to address each point of the pledge. Now, the scope of the guidance was limited to just what was required by FDA by USDA, the Customs and Border Protection Agency, and in certain instances, the Federal Trade Commission. So it didn't go beyond what was required by these different federal agencies. It relied on the U.S. rules and regulations as references throughout the document, and then it did not go beyond the scope of the BSB pledge. The intention of the guidance, they had two audiences in mind when they developed it. So one audience was sellers and processors. We wanted them to know ways that they could avoid committing fraud. And then it was also geared towards buyers so that they could make sure they received the product that they wanted. And then this guidance is available to both members and non-members, because we want to make sure that everyone involved in the seafood industry has access to this and can use it as a tool. So as we talked about before, there's 4 points of the BSB pledge, and then these 4 points were used as the outline for the guidance. And I won't go through these again, but they're displayed there on your screen, what these 4 points are. Next slide, please. Can you back up a minute? Okay. So that guidance was basically organized according to the 4 points of the pledge, and you can see here by the table of contents that that's basically how the guidance was laid out. So we have a section for each point of the pledge and then an appendix that corresponds with each point. So the slide here in front of you is just an example of how each section starts off. It gives you an introduction and then cites the laws and regulations that govern each section of the pledge. All right, next slide, please. So here's just an example of an appendix. Each section is followed by an appendix. We tried to keep the sections rather short. They're each about 2 pages in length each. And then to kind of make it a quick read as people are going through that, but then the more detailed information is in an appendix. And there's an appendix for each section of the guidance. Next slide, please. Now the guidance is organized by methods for processors and suppliers. So as you go through it, you'll find it starts off with methods to ensure correct weights and counts, et cetera, during processing. And then it lists those in a bullet type format to follow along easily. And then it's also organized by methods for buyers. So once again, it gives you the methods for the buyers, and then in a bullet format gives you the different points that the buyer should be looking for. So moving on to another topic, BSB developed training presentations at the request of some of our membership that they could use within their own companies to train different audiences of employees within their own companies. So we have 3 slide sets that we prepared. Based upon input from a working group, we developed 3 PowerPoint presentations that members can use to train others in their companies about economic integrity and how to follow the BSB pledge. So these are all available as resources on the BSB web page, and they're available to the public. All right, next slide, please. All right,
Mark,
there's 3 different...
Mark, before you get started,
yes.
Again, if people could make sure your line is muted. I see some people who are unmuted. Again, just look for either the microphone or the little telephone handset on your toolbar and just click mute, and then you'll be muted. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, there's 3 different PowerPoint presentations that are available that you could use to train different audiences within your company. I'll just mention the 3 of those. The first one here is for your sales and procurement staff. Next slide. The next one then is something you could use with line employees. And these are all just slightly different, but you know, they're adapted to the different audiences within their companies. And then the third one on the next slide would be for company management. And that's the one that I'll just go through real briefly just to show you how the slide sets are organized and how you could use that. And as I mentioned before, they're all fairly similar, but they do have some points that are different because we wanted to make sure that each audience, you know, each one was geared to a specific audience. So this is the one that was geared towards management. Just the opening slide here. Next slide, please. All right, we just wanted to, first of all, to start off with having you emphasize your pride in your NFI and BSB membership. Next slide, please. And then just wanted to emphasize, too, that as an NFI member, that you have pledged to conduct your business in an honest and trustworthy manner. Next slide. And then this slide here just kind of emphasizes why honesty and trustworthiness are important to your business. And then it just goes through the different points of why that's important to your company. Next slide. The next slide basically presents the effects of not following good practices and what that can lead to. So that just includes some different things like loss of brand confidence and loss of sales. And then these are just the 4 things that NFI members pledge to uphold. So we just try to keep re-emphasizing that within the different companies, what the pledge is and what a company has pledged to do when they join NFI. And then the slide set just kind of goes through and gives a brief synopsis of what each part of the pledge means. And we just try to keep these points, these bullet points, simple, just to make it, you know, something that it's easy to review. But here's the first point: products are correctly labeled for weights and counts. What does that mean to your company? Then in the next slide, we talk again about products are correctly labeled for weights and counts, but what does that mean particularly for your team? And that just gives some quick points about why that's important to you as a manager. And then the next slide, we go through the second point of the pledge, that products are correctly labeled for identity and that species are not substituted in any manner. So again, just kind of explain what that means in some short bullet points. And then in the next slide, just explains, this is a continuation of that same idea of the second point of the pledge. And then in the next slide, then we talk about, so what does point number 2 mean for your team? And we just kind of list some benefits to how following this practice can benefit your company. So in the next slide then, we go into the third point of the pledge and just kind of talk a little bit about what does that mean for your company. And then in the next slide, you know, what does that mean for your team? How does that benefit your company? And why is that particularly important to management? And then in the next slide, we talk about the fourth point: products adhere to all other labeling laws. And what does that mean for your company? Or what does that mean, you know, in general? And then the next slide then talks a little bit about what does that mean particularly for your team. What do managers need to understand about that? And talks a little bit about budgeting and legal ramifications and so forth. So just as a summary, it just kind of sums things up. We want to emphasize to people working for your company that following these guidelines will help your company to honor the BSB pledge, and then it helps you better serve your customers by doing your business in an honest and trustworthy manner. So next slide, and I'll turn it back to Lisa and let her talk about some additional documents we have available.
Great, thank you, Mark. Appreciate you going through the best practice document and the training slides. And again, we certainly encourage you to take those training slides, incorporate them into your company's training that you do for all your employees to help emphasize your company's commitment to economic integrity. So just a couple other useful documents that we've developed over the years that we hope that you will use, look for on the website, download them, share them with your colleagues. And they're really all here to help your company understand FDA regulations, preventing seafood fraud, and sharing that information and explaining that information to your suppliers and to your customers. So the first document that was actually developed at the end of last year is an NFI guide to FDA labeling requirements. And this really walks you through the various FDA requirements for basic label requirements according to FDA's regulations. It's a multi-page document, pretty comprehensive, that discusses just the basic requirements of labeling, where they need to be placed on the package, a discussion about ingredients, including water as an ingredient, to be listed in your ingredient panel if you've added water to your product. It's available at a couple places on the NFI website. The first place that provides a lot of information about the document is actually on the members portal. We did a webinar about the labeling guidelines back in April, and a recording of that webinar is available to NFI members on the NFI members portal. If you log into that, on the left-hand side of the screen are a list of topics. If you click on webinars at the very bottom of that list, it'll bring up all the previous webinars we've done. Actually, this webinar will be posted there as well. You can view the recording. You can download the slides if you want to use those, share those with your company employees or your customers, your suppliers. And then also the document itself is available at that website. The document's also available on the Better Seafood Board website. One of the 3 buttons that are located in the middle of that screen, the far left one, if you click there, that will take you to the PDF of the document as well. So I certainly encourage you to download that, review it. If you have questions, please let us know. We can provide clarification on that document. And again, all these resources are there for your use by you and your company. We also have developed member-only references. We felt there were some things that we didn't want to have on the public page that are only accessible by NFI members. Of course, if you all would have access to that, you can get to that again by going to aboutseafood.com, the members portal. And on that list on the left-hand side of the screen where it says BSB resources will take you to that list. Also from the Better Seafood Board page on the right-hand side with the list of resources, additional BSB member resources will take you right to this page. So there's several documents here that we want to just briefly share with you. And again, these are all here for your use as NFI members. First document is just a list of BSB or Better Seafood Board talking points. Oftentimes people are afraid to put the logo on their trade show booths or use it in their materials because they're not sure how to answer some questions about the Better Seafood Board. So we put together these talking points to help companies explain what the Better Seafood Board is, why it was formed, and really to share your commitment to preventing seafood fraud. So this document would be available for your use to download from the website. Another document that would be available for you to use to share with your suppliers is just a brief review of U.S. regulations for ingredient labeling. We found that we really need to emphasize the fact that all ingredients that are used in producing seafood products need to be listed on the label. So this is just a one-page that kind of summarizes that requirement If you find that you're getting questions from your suppliers or your customers about whether something has to be labeled or not, this document is a good document to share to really explain why ingredients need to be listed on a label. So this is available for you to download as well. We also have a couple of guides that you can share with your suppliers to help them understand what the Better Seafood Board Pledge means. So this document is pretty comprehensive. It's really an abbreviated version of the best practices document. But again, the BSB board members felt that it was important that we have something that was specific to your supplier, since they're your partners in making sure you're not committing fraud, or vendors, just so they really understand the points of the BSB pledge. It's really to help your suppliers, help you keep your commitment to economic integrity. And then finally, we have a document that's just a sample product specification that you might want to share with your customers so they understand what they should be asking suppliers for, so they're not getting cheated. You know, you're providing product that is labeled properly, but your competitor might not be. You want to make sure your customers can push back to your competitors to make sure everyone is following the same rules. So this example product specification template can help with that. And this is available on the members only website. So really just in summary, we wanted to have this webinar to help you understand the resources that have been developed over the years, to help you understand the role of the Better Seafood Board, and how your company can adhere to the federal, state, and local laws and regulations that revolve around preventing seafood fraud. And we wanted to provide a way to help you communicate your commitment to economic integrity. So to help you support your commitment to the Better Seafood Board, National Fisheries Institute, and to give you some tools to help to share that commitment. So we really hope that you look at these materials that are on the website, pass them along to others within your company. We're not quite sure often how far some of these documents get within our member companies, so we want to make sure that you feel comfortable passing it along to others within your company to incorporate these materials into your practices and your training materials. So with that, we'll see if we have any questions. There was one question that came in on the chat line, and I did respond to it, but I'll read the question and the answer, and then we'll see if we have any questions after that. So the question was about the BSB logo, and they were asking if there's a cost to use the BSB logo. And there is no cost. You need to follow the usage guidelines. But any NFI member in good standing can use the logo. So all you need to do is request the artwork. So there is no cost to that. So that was the only question that we had in the chat line. So now we'll take some time to see if you have any questions. If you want to ask a question, just unmute your line, and then we'll respond.
Hi, this is Kevin from Cedar Lake.
Hi, Kevin.
I wanted to ask about the login credentials for these sites.
So you can request a password. I mean, if you don't have a password to the aboutseafood.com, there is a place on the website to request login information. So you can follow through with that. And then you'll get a response back with login credentials.
And for the other site, the BSB?
The BetterSeafoodBoard.com website is open access. You don't need login credentials for that.
Oh,
there are some resources that will link you to the members only page, and then it'll ask for credentials when you click on that.
Okay, perfect.
Very good question. Thank you. And if you find you have difficulties in getting the login access, just send us an email and we'll make sure you get connected to the right people. And we have been recording this webinar. We'll post it on the Better Seafood Board website, as well as the webinar page of the NFI website. So you have access to it. You can share it with others within your company. Again, we really hope that people will look at these materials, use them in your training for communicating with your suppliers and your customers. You know, that's what they're there for, is to make sure that everyone really understands what the commitment to the pledge means and how to meet that commitment. So we really encourage you to look at these materials. If you have questions about them, please let us know. Our email addresses are on the screen here, and we certainly hope to hear from you about these materials. In addition, if you have any suggestions for other materials that you would like to see in relation to seafood fraud, how to prevent fraud, or the Better Seafood Board, let us know, and we'll certainly bring them forward to the Board of Managers to see if this is something that we need to develop and work on. So if we have no further questions, we'll end the webinar. Certainly thank you for your interest and your attention. We had a good crowd here this afternoon. And again, feel free to contact either Mark or myself if you have any questions about the Better Seafood Board. So thank you very much. We'll give you back a few minutes of your day here, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. And just keep looking at the Inside NFI newsletter for announcements for the next webinar. So thank you, everyone.